Hey guys, welcome back. Today I have this costume creation in store for you. I will show you how to make this hat and jacket. This design is of course for the Mad Hatter, although I reckon you could tweak this jacket a little bit to make even a Pirates of the Caribbean themed jacket. All of the material for the hat and the jacket, including the lace and whatnot, costs around the $30 mark to buy, and I do have plenty of it left over. So it is a reasonably inexpensive costume to make. Just a little bit of viewer discretion before I start this video. I am not a fashion designer, I'm not a seamstress, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm merely bringing you along for the journey with me as I try and create this jacket. I'm actually so impressed with how it turned out for my first attempt at sewing anything. I'm sure there are many people out there though cringing so much while watching this because they're like, she has no idea what she's doing, but I thought regardless of that, I'm gonna bring you along on this journey with me, as I love the thought of being able to create my own costumes and not having to rely on buying things. You can always tweak things and make it your own. But enough chit chat, I'm gonna get straight into this because it's a fair chance it's already gonna be around a 15-minute video of the actual footage of creating the two of them. So I'm gonna shush, I'm gonna zip my lips and get cracking and let past Evie show you how all of this is created. Let's get cracking. Okay guys, so to start off, I'm just getting a bowl and just tracing around that with actually a scalpel, but I'd find it a little bit easier if I went around with a marker first, then removed the bowl and went around with the scalpel, just because it was a little bit tougher than I was expecting. And then I'm going in with the smaller circle, that'll be the top of the very hat, and just tracing around that and then cutting it out as well. So next up, I'm going to make the supports that'll hold the top of the hat to the bottom of the hat. Now, I was lucky enough that the bend in my cardboard was the exact length that I wanted. However, you would just want to find out the height of the hat and then add maybe about an inch on lengthwise, just so you can fold it and glue it to the top and the bottom of the hat. Now, I'm making a smaller circle on the bottom of the hat than the top of the hat is, just so it kind of tapers out and the top of the hat looks that little bit bigger. I'm just pre-folding the actual supports, just so when I go to hot glue gun them, I don't have to worry about them being too hard to work with. They'll slot right in and they'll fold perfectly first go. So just with a hot glue gun, I'm going in and gluing on each of the individual supports all the way around. I should have mentioned earlier as well that it is ideal to fold the top and the bottom of the support, so when you apply the top of the hat, it is easier than trying to do what I'm doing here, which is fiddly work, and you'll have them all even as well. So once they're all folded and they're all dry, slot in the top part of the hat, move it around until it hits the right spot, and then just hot glue gun each of the individual supports onto the hat, trying to keep it as centered as possible as you go. If it's not centered, guys, don't stress, the Mad Hatter is a crazy man, so he can have a crazy lopsided hat. So I decided that the hat was too tall, so I've just folded them a little bit more and then just gluing them on. I like to go opposite kind of supports, gluing them at the same time, just so they really hold down together and you get it in the right spot. And while they're drying, if you could just apply a little bit of pressure to the top of the hat like I am here, that'd be ideal, just to make sure that they really set into place properly. Now I'm just cutting out another top of the hat to put on so you do not get the rough edge on top of the hat. However, you are covering it in fabric, so if you do not have enough cardboard to do this step, don't stress guys. It'll all be okay, but if you want to make it that little bit more flat on top, go ahead and apply another layer to the top of the hat. Now just with some felt material, I'm going in and cutting out the base of the hat. This will be what is sitting against your head. I wanted it to be different to the rest of the material on the top of the hat, as I wanted that contrast. Now with some velvety material, I'm just going in and cutting the same size circle, as this will be kind of the layer that sits on top of the base of the hat that goes around the middle. So then just using the same measurements as before, cutting out the center just so you can wrap it around the hat. If you didn't want to have to cut this material to get it around, you could of course, before you hot glue gunned the center of the hat on, you could of course have put that on, but I don't think that far ahead when I'm doing things, so this works fine. The velvet material makes it so you pretty much can't see where the join is anyway. And just take your time hot glue gunning it, guys. I like to do the top first so then I can tuck around any edges and hot glue gun the base on so it hides it and make it sit nice and neat. Now I wanted there to be actually a hole in the bottom of the hat to make it look like a legitimate hat, as most hats have a hole in the bottom where your head sits. So I'm just going in and tracing out the line where it usually would be, cutting out a smaller circle in the middle, and then making a little incision so it can tuck up nicely into the hat to have a nice smooth edge. Just hot glue gunning that on, I like to use the hot glue gun. It's the simplest thing, it's readily available, and it does a great job for little makeshift hats like this. So next I'm cutting out the material that I need to cover the sides of the wall of the hat. Now I am not very good at this. I had to make a little net to figure out what exact shape I needed to do. Now I just made one out of paper. I just wrapped some paper around the side of the hat and cut it till it was the right shape. It's easier than just gluing it on and trimming the material as you go. Now take your time with this, just hot glue gun each individual kind of support of the hat and then stick the material down to that and you should be okay. Making sure to trim off any excess when you get to the final little edge, just so it's nice and smooth and it's not built up in any one. And with any bits of material hanging over the top, just make incisions and hot glue gun them down like you did to the bottom of the center of the hat, just to try and get it nice and smooth and keep the material really quite nice and tight. And we're almost at the finish mark, guys. Next you just want to cut out a circle of material to stick on the top of the hat. And for that just use the same thing that you traced the cardboard out with. And then you just want to stick that to the top of the hat and you have pretty much finished the whole body of the hat. Pretty much all that's left is just detail work. I do like to just add a little bit of ribbon and some feathers and whatnot. If you do have some Mad Hatter trinkets that you could add to it, by all means go for it. The rest is pretty much up to you to decorate however you like. So I'm just putting some green polka dot ribbon on. This is what I'm going to be tying my jacket up with later, so if you can tie the hat in with the actual jacket and just make the whole costume kind of flow a lot better, go for it. If not, make it your own, make it a little bit crazy, do what you want with it, guys. And I'm just hot glue gunning that on as it's the easiest thing to do. Okay, before I get started, I'm gonna say trigger warning to anyone that has ever properly sewn anything in their entire life, because this is probably gonna set you off, because I have no idea what I'm doing. This could flop and it could be hilarious, but I'm bringing you along. I'm bringing you along for the journey. Now this is mostly aimed at my sister, who is a qualified fashion designer, so she technically, I could have called her and asked for some help, but I didn't, and I really hope it flops so she can laugh at my expense, but if not, yes, I'm gonna rub it in your face that I'm better than you. Now I had no jacket to go off for this. I have just made some weird pattern up in my head. I'm gonna go with it. It could be terrible, more than likely gonna be terrible, but yeah, we'll see. Now before I go any further, guys, I'm going to admit that I have no idea what I'm doing here. I roughly designed the layout of the jacket that I wanted, took some measurements that I don't even know if they were correct, and made kind of a pattern out of some paper that I stuck together. Now I'm sure you could find an actual kind of pattern to make a jacket like this, however, I just wanted to try and create it on my own and see how I went. I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out. I mean, it's not a fitted jacket by any means, but it does the job. So once you've got the pattern on the paper marked out, I just like to pin it to the actual material and cut around it so it doesn't budge. I've got a back panel and two front panels, and I'd already turned some of this material into like a tube, so I'm using that for the sleeves, so I'm not going to actually show you how to do that, but just I used the whole length of the material and sewed it together and then turned it inside out, and I had this big long tube of material. So although I don't show you that, it is a pretty simple, straightforward thing. I did not measure the tube before making this at all, so I've just had to work with it as I put it together. Now I do admit there's several things that took me a lot longer than it should have. I sewed some things back to front, I sewed them inside out. So I did have to tweak it quite a lot as I did things backwards quite a lot. Okay, so I'm just gonna go and tidy up all the edges just to make sure, that they don't start fraying, so I'm just gonna go over them. I really wanted to change my thread from white to black, but do you think for the life of me I can find my black thread? No. So I might just have to suck it up and use white, which I know is going to piss a lot of people off too. So any parts of the jacket that will not be joined to another part, so the front and the actual collar, I have just folded over and I'm sewing that just so the material doesn't actually fray, which I was just being extra precautious because I didn't want all this work to go to waste. As much as I don't like using the white, it is for the Mad Hatter, and his jackets are usually crazy and mismatched, so I'm not too concerned, but brown would have been, or black would have been ideal. So there is the tidied up edge. It's not perfect, but it will do the job, and that's all that I needed to do. So I'm just attaching the front panel to the back panel. Just make sure that you've got it the right way in, so when the jacket is on, the seam is not going to be on the outside, if you get what I mean. Making sure just to also pin it together so it does not move, just so you get a nice flat edge. So I always like to put the pins in so when it's going forward, I can pull the pins out and keep the material together nicely so I don't have to wrap my hands around the back of the sewing machine. So once I've attached both front panels, this is what it's looking like. I mean, you could leave it like that if you wanted to have more of a vest and a bright colourful t-shirt underneath, but that's just an idea. That's not the ribbon I used. That is just an apron cord. But if you get the gist of it, now I'm cutting the sleeves. This is just the tube that I made. I'm cutting it in half. It was as long as I needed it to be, otherwise I would have made some more. So as you can see, they are quite wide sleeves. I didn't want to make them too small because I wanted big, baggy, over the top Mad Hatter sleeves. So I knew that I needed the actual sleeves to be on a bit of an angle, so they were shorter at the bottom of my arm and longer at the top of my arm. So I just pinned it and played around with it until I was happy, and then I actually cut the material away, which this was terrifying because I'm like, there's no going back from this. If I ruin this, I'm gonna have to make complete new sleeves. But alas, it did not ruin it. I did okay, surprisingly. And our sleeves I found were the hardest because I had to figure out how to attach them and sew them, and I spent about 30 minutes just staring at the material on the floor. But what you want to do is have the sleeve the right way in, but the jacket the wrong way in, like inside out, if you get what I mean, and then pin them together. It's easier if you just look at a jacket that you have, but I didn't have one, so I was just really trying to figure it out while I was going. But I'd highly recommend using a reference jacket for just general things, you know? Now at this point I hadn't actually sewn the top of my jacket together where the front panels and the back panels would have been. I had just had them pinned so I could then sew them together after I added the sleeves. However, I'd recommend just sewing them before the sleeves. You don't need to worry about that. It's all okay. You can go ahead and do that and not stress about it. Now I'd highly recommend taking your time with the sleeves as you want to have them nice and together and you don't want to have holes. But just like anything else, you want to take your time and actually put in a little bit of effort to what you're doing so you do not make a mistake and have to unpick the sleeve and stitch it back on again, which I did for the second sleeve because I got a little bit too excited and was like, yay, I did the first one fine, I know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I'm doing and I automatically sewed it on back to front and had to unpick the entire thing. So learn from me, guys, don't do that. But there you have it, guys, that is sleeve 1 attached. I'm actually really impressed with that. I'd never attached a sleeve before and it has the kind of flared sleeve that I was wanting. So there's the jacket once I have attached both sleeves. I do go in and actually taper the sleeves a little bit more so they're tighter around higher up my arm and just really quite flared, but I do want to add a little bit of lace around the kind of cuff of the sleeve. Here you can see me pinning the sleeve to try and get that extra flare at the top and thinner at the base. So I'm not really taking any measurements here, so I'd highly recommend that once you sew it, don't cut it, or don't cut it before you sew it in case you have made it too tight, because you can't go back from that. So I like to sew it, try it on, and if it's fine, then I'll cut away the excess material, but before that I'll leave it as it is in case that I have made it too tight and my non-measurements were wrong. So the sleeves turned out pretty good. I do apologize, the material is crinkled and it's twisted and stuff, but you get the gist of what's going on here. So once that is done, I then kind of just fold up the inside of the sleeve and cut it to where I need it to be, making sure to not take it back too far as you do want to fold it over and you want to have a little bit of a seam allowance. So allow yourself maybe ½ an inch just to fold over and then sew that on. And once you are happy with the sleeves, it's time to get on to adding the cuffs. Now I do apologize for my messy crafting room, but when I get creative, everything's turned to a mess. So I've just cut up a little bit of lace. I measured it around the cuff of the actual sleeve, and then I'm just going in and trying my hardest to sew around the actual seam that's already there. If you did have brown thread, this would not be a problem. However, because I do have white, I'm trying to keep it as close as I possibly can so it doesn't look too ridiculous. And don't forget to actually join the lace up, as I hadn't sewed it into a full circle. Here I am just sewing it along it so it doesn't have a gaping open bit at the bottom of the sleeve, if you get what I mean. But there you go, I'm actually pretty impressed with how that looks. Next I wanted to add a little bit of colour. I decided I wanted to go with an orange to match the hair. This is just the same felt that we used for the hat, except orange. And I'm just sketching out a pocket roughly. I then put the jacket on me, sit the pocket where I want it to be and kind of pin it a little bit so I have a rough idea where it's going to sit once I put the jacket on. Otherwise, I find I have put pockets on things before and they've been completely way off and it's been close to my belly button or up on my shoulder than it is on my boobie. And then before I sew that on, I'm just going in and measuring a little bit of lace that I want to sit behind it. I didn't want to actually attach it to the pocket because I knew you'd be able to see the seam. So I actually sew the lace onto the jacket and not onto the actual pocket, but the pocket will then sit up so you can't see the seam of the lace. I then also go in with the pocket and attach that. And then that's the pocket done. It's a pretty easy little addition to the jacket. And then I wanted even more lace on this jacket because I was having an absolute grand old time in Spotlight because they had a sale on lace. So I'm just using a kind of ivory coloured lace and just going along the actual front of the jacket where the collar would be. I'm making a little bit of a collar lace, I guess you could call it. Now this is just one long piece that goes from one side of the collar all the way around the back of the neck to the other side of the collar. So then I just sew the actual lace on, tapered at the very beginning so it's a nice gradual increase to its full length up around the neck. And that's pretty much the last thing that I do to the jacket. I then, once it's done, just wrap a little bit of ribbon around me to kind of bring it in to give it some shape. But other than that, guys, that is the end of the actual process of how I made it. So there you have it, guys. This is the finished look. So in total, this hat cost me probably around the $4 mark to make. Of course, I didn't have to buy, cardboard. I had plenty around. I just had to pay for the actual material and the ribbon that I stuck to it. So this jacket probably, I think, cost around the $2 mark to make. Disregard that. It definitely didn't cost $2. It cost around $12 to make. I'm sorry. My brain just had a little bit of a meltdown. If you want to get a different brown material for you to make the jacket with, you could get this made for around $8. However, this material was around $20 a meter, so it cost me a fair bit more, but I had it lying around and I wasn't going to use it. You could definitely get away with using just a plain brown fabric though. You wouldn't have to go this nice of a fabric. And then of course I do have a wig that I add to this costume that I was around the $17 mark. So this whole get up, not including pants, because I just have leggings on, hat, wig and jacket would cost around the $30 mark, I reckon, which is pretty inexpensive when you think about how much some costumes will cost you and the quality of them. You at least know the outfit that you are making will fit you perfectly. But I'm actually so impressed with my efforts, guys. I don't know how to sew. This was the first major thing that I ever sewed, and it's a little high-backed one. I wanted it to be kind of almost cropped. I wanted it to be quite long at the front. You could, of course, I'm not going to open it because I don't have a t-shirt on underneath this. You could just leave it open and have an open kind of throw over and just have a nice bright colourful shirt on underneath it. But thank you so much for watching, guys. If you would like to see how to do the Mad Hatter makeup, I did post the tutorial yesterday, so go check that out. Thank you so much for watching though. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you do not miss out on any of the Halloween tutorials I have coming for you this October. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!